Hi everyone, good evening. Can you all hear me? Okay, thanks, Maitreyi.
Yes.
Hi everyone. It's really nice to see everyone again. It's just been a couple weeks, but we really have some exciting stuff going on today. Thanks for making time on a Saturday again. I'm really excited about the discussions that we'll get into today. So we'll get right to it. I know some of us are not. They said that they'll be a little bit late, but we'll get started anyway. Um, yeah, we have like this really interesting reading to do today, so I'll just jump right in. So a quick heads up. For those who are attending for the first time, we have this Padlet. I'll share a link with you. Give me a second. And then you can enter your information in here so others on this group can reach out to you. Um, and you can also look at other community members' information. So yeah, if you haven't already added your info, please add it on this Padlet. Next up, just reminding everyone of the norms. We'll be on time, present, and open-minded. There's a lot to uncover here, and we'll often be discussing um, opposing views on evidence. So it's important to stay open-minded and present and participate in discussion. And the last thing is just making you aware of our journey. We started by setting the stage, which was just us introducing ourselves to the community and talking a little bit about what evidence is and why is it important. Right. Today we're getting ready for the show, which is we'll talk a lot about things to do before you start an intervention in education. So let's get to it. Before we begin, can anybody volunteer to walk us through what we did last time? Just a quick, like 1 or 2 line summary of what we discussed last time. Hint, it was about evidence.
Hi, Rhea. Hi, everyone. I'll
I,
get us started maybe. We spoke about what is evidence and what does evidence mean to us. That's how we started the session.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Padma. Soumya also says we read a paper on the state of education research and evidence and divided into groups to share our perspectives. Yes, that's basically about it. We discussed what we think evidence is, why it's important, also uncovered a paper that was like from a very long time ago. But it also sort of brought light for me on the fact that this has been started to, be talked about for a long time, but we're still trying to develop practice around it. So one more thing we did was we started this LinkedIn group, LinkedIn community on evidence. So which is exclusively available to just everybody on this group. So if you haven't joined it already, I'll share a link to that with you. But we also saw some great articles and videos that were being posted on that group. Did any of you get a chance to go through any of those links, any resources, or outside of that group, any interesting readings or talks that you were a part of? Okay, I understand. I think this is one of the reasons we started this community in the first place. It's really hard to get out of your daily routine of, working on whatever you're working on, or if not, otherwise. to take out time to expand your horizons into improving practice. And that's why we thought it was necessary for us to do this as well. Because although Colab works on evidence, we also have like a lot going on. So it's hard to take out time specifically for this. So this was our way of sort of accountability for us, that we are engaging with new resources on evidence, new papers, new readings, videos, what others have to say about evidence and so on. So definitely, if you don't get a chance to explore resources of your own, any resource that's being posted on the group, make use of that and take some time out in your day if you can to read through it and share your thoughts about it. Also share your thoughts, because this is not a right or wrong evidence. There's so many schools of thought about what is really necessary and what isn't. So opinion sharing is very, very welcome. But yeah, definitely explore some of the resources on this group. I've posted a link on the chat box. Last time I also told you that we're going to be starting this meeting with this thing called a congruence scan. So let's start with that. Let's see. So you all remember this congruence of triangles concept that you all learned when you were in school? Hopefully you do, and if you don't, well, let's really definitely work on the education sector in our country. But congruence basically implies, actually, let me just pause and invite responses. What is congruence? Anybody remember from 7th grade math?
I think it's a similarity but in different scales. It can be small or big, but you have equal angles and equal proportions to the sides. I hope I didn't embarrass myself.
No, absolutely not. I think that was very, very close. So similarity was another concept. Similarity is just similarity at different scales, but congruency is just, you can just paste one thing on top of another and you won't be able to tell there are two things. Aishwarya, were you saying something?
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that I remember the definition that our teacher used to teach, that if you put one on the other, it will, be indistinguishable. You can almost paste it on top of each other and it will be the same. And similarity was in terms of, maybe a side is similar, but the angle is not. It's still similar, but not all the properties. So yeah, Jip was just saying that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aishwarya. So yeah, so congruency is, an alignment between one and another thing. So we're going to do a congruence scan for ourselves. Does it involve triangles? No, but it's still fun. So basically, what we're trying to answer through this congruence scan is, where are we and where would we like to be? And no extra points for guessing that this is in relation to evidence. Where are we in terms of our ability to use evidence in our work, and where would we like to be? And we would want to update that after every session for ourselves, right? Let me quickly jump into what it is. So it's basically answering 4 questions again and again. Can I please invite someone to read these questions out loud? Can I invite Daya?
Yeah, hi, sure. So just the 4 boxes, right? What we believe, reality, how this belief is manifested in our institution, evidence to support our reality, what we might do to enhance congruence between beliefs and reality.
Absolutely. Any questions about what this is? It's pretty much what we're currently doing and what do we want to do going forward based on this new belief that we're developing as we go through this learning community. And it might not even be a new belief. It might be a refinement to our previous belief, if anything. So that's basically it. So we're going to do this congruence scan a lot, so that we're not just discussing theory of what's evidence and how do we incorporate it, but we can actually plan some doable action steps for ourselves in our work. And that's what will make this sort of a learning community, as opposed to just like a course, which I'm definitely not qualified to give you on evidence. So let me give you an example of what this might look like. So this was a congruence scan done by a school. I copied this from the internet. But the school was trying to do this congruence scan for one of the things that they want to focus on. And this is what it looked like. right? Take 30 seconds and go through this congruence scan example. So let's come back in 10 seconds. Okay, any thoughts, any questions about what a congruence scan will be?
Uh, so, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi Anirudh.
Hi, Ria. So, from what I am understanding is that there would be like some sort of a mismatch in between what we believe and what our actions are, and that's not always like a we're not always aware of what implicit sort of a bias or like implicit sort of an assumption that we're making. So, for example, here, even if we believe that all students are creative, yet we are not really providing the avenue of creativity to all students. So, I'm assuming that that is where the congruence can would come in handy, where we think that we believe something, but our actions are not completely aligned with what we believe in. Does that answer your question, or like?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Absolutely, Anirudh. So thanks for elaborating this on this a little bit. My basic question was, are we understanding what a congruence scan is? And the context that you've explained it beautifully. What we'll be doing is we have sort of a belief in evidence. That's why we're in this session on a Saturday evening. And we also described or put words to our thoughts last time when we described what evidence is for us, why it's important and all that. So we obviously all believe in evidence. But what does that mean for our work, and is it aligned to what our beliefs are? So basically what you said. So we'll be doing that exercise right now, and we'll be doing that going forward after every session to come up with some actionables for ourselves. So what we'll do is I've sent a link up top. It says we will fill these out after every session. I'm sorry, I just copy pasted my notes. But yes, you can click on this link and that'll be the sheet that we do a congruence scan on every time. I'll share this link with you all times, but click on this and there's this tab. It's called make a copy, and make a copy of it with your name on the tab. Right? It has the same questions that are listed on the screen. And the question or the belief that we're going to put down on the first column, so in the what we believe section, is going to be our definition of evidence and why it's important. So we did a little bit of this last time, so I'm going to share the workbook with you also. This is where we put down why evidence, what is evidence. So you can take help from this also because you already did some work in putting things down. And put that down for yourself. What do you believe about evidence in the first column? And then take some time to fill out what the reality is. What is the evidence to support that reality? And what you can do to enhance congruence between beliefs and reality. So one of the things that you can do to do that alignment, because this evidence thing is a very broad thing. So I don't think you can like come up with very specific action steps just yet. We're just starting to go deep into it. But things could be, you spend maybe you peruse through one resource on evidence and how to incorporate it a month, or you join something like a learning community on evidence, right? So that could be your first steps there, and then we'll do a little bit more specific things as we go on, starting this session. Any questions about what we should be doing? All right, thank you everyone. I think this is going to be very useful. I know you're all getting a certificate, which is a big deal at the end of this, but I think the best thing that you can take away from a learning community like this is just really doable actionables that you set for yourself from your learnings, because that's something that I often find myself not being able to do. I attend webinars and talks by people who are talking about great stuff that I would like to include in my work, but it's really hard to sort of set aside some time to figure out what an actionable is, and that's just a practice that needs to be developed. So that's why I thought this would be a good idea to do. Moving on, like I said, we're talking about evidence and what can we do in evidence before we start a program. The next call we start thinking more about, okay, what is during the program and after the program? What are some things that we can do there? But today we're talking about before the program. So before we begin, how do you currently do evidence, whatever work you're doing, before you start a program? A program could be an intervention, it could be something else as well. But what is that evidence due diligence you do before you start a program? Take a minute to jot things down. I'm dividing all of us into breakout rooms of 2 to 3 people, and let's discuss with the people that we're in the meeting room with, and just share what we do. And that's it. It's just going to be 5 minutes, enough so that everybody quickly just shares what they usually do. What are the steps they follow that might lead to a more evidence-informed approach before they start a program. So my breakout rooms are ready. 5 minutes should be fine. And let's begin.
I'm not like very sure. I will share limited to the program that I work with. So we are a fellowship program and we are incubated by the Teach for India Fellowship. So a lot of things that we do. So we work in 2 spheres, right? One is the classroom itself, where we teach, and then the program also is like expects fellows to work with all the stakeholders in the school and develop school as a whole. So for the classroom, what we do in the classroom, a lot of it is adapted and contextualized from Teach for India. For in math, we partner with Avishkar, so it's adapted and from Avishkar. And we've looked at Avishkar's impact report and how many students are studying in this method. Where is Avishkar working and what's the impact like? So there is evidence for the math methodology that we implement in our classroom. Whereas for English, it's largely based on what we've learned from TFI and a couple of other partner organizations. We're not very sure if it is correct for our context, and right.
Little bit of noise in the background,
Okay.
but I'm able to hear you,
I'm
Anirudh. It's
sorry.
okay. That's okay.
Okay, perfect.
Mm.
Yeah, so basically what I was saying is that usually the thing is that we would end up, either talking to someone who has been doing the work that we are trying to do for maybe a while,
Mm.
ask their experiences of how to go about doing something, or
Right.
maybe based on our own intuitions or our own experiences, we would just come up with some sort of an intervention or some sort of steps that we would want to undertake.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
Usually, I'm not really sure if we would if all this evidence or all this evidence that we collect, or it is majorly qualitative in nature, and it
Yeah.
is based on a lot of feelings about what might be working, because usually there aren't a lot of concrete proof points to say
Right.
that there are certain.
Might happen because of that. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Soumya. Thank you, Daya. But certain programs, I'm just thinking out loud, listening to both of you.
Yeah.
Like programs of certain kinds, right? Say, for instance, so what we are doing is we have a fellowship for one of the cadres of the government school teachers. And like it's sort of first sort of intervention. Like we don't have such fellowships as school teachers. There's a lacuna of literature as well. Like we don't have any readings or something like that to understand how such an intervention works. So I was just thinking out loud that in such cases, what are the best case scenarios? And it's just trial and error. Like you do it, you see, and then you go back and then you redefine it. Just top of the mind thoughts, like
I think there's some network connectivity issues probably. Okay.
I think what I found like similar between both of our sharings was I think using both like evidence from outside, but also really listening to stakeholders within and trying to understand the needs a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think +1 to the whole prototype and trying it out fast.
Yeah.
That like just sitting and waiting on it. So yeah, it was resonating. Hello.
Sorry, Samya, I can't hear you.
Hi. Sorry. No, there was something. Yeah. My phone wasn't working. Yeah. So basically, I'm just thinking of the last few instances, the different kinds of projects that I've done in the recent times where evidence sort of becomes very important. So in
Hello, welcome back. Was this enough time for everyone to share? Okay, great. I think we're just waiting for 10 more seconds for everyone to join back. Okay, now I'd love to hear. So I was hopping in and out of rooms and I was like, okay, I need to go to every room before I close the room. So I'm sorry if it went over like by 2 minutes. But I would love to hear maybe from like breakout rooms 3 and 5. I'm just randomly choosing numbers. 3 and 5 first, and then anybody else who wants to share what they heard, basically a list of things that you do before your program. Anyone from 3? So, you don't know the number? Sorry, I'll tell you.
No, sorry.
I'll tell
I
you.
don't think we do.
I'll tell you. Give me a second. So, breakout room 3 had Aishwarya, Daya, and Soumya. And breakout room 5 had Akriti, Palak, and Soumya. You know which Soumya I'm talking about because you know your group members' names.
Hi, I think I can share for breakout room number 5.
Okay.
We were discussing about how we have multiple strands of like we have a goal that is set, and then on the basis of then goal and the vision, on the basis of that we have kinds of classroom observations or impact assessment, and during that we have particular rubrics and matrices that we refer to, which also help us to objectify the process of observations, because mostly our work is also, I mean, all the 3 of us were very commonly working on SEL. So I think observing SEL in classrooms also needs a lot of evidence and actions. So mostly it's all based on the rubrics wherein we, I mean, I was also sharing how for us we have particular strands like collaboration, and under collaborations we have multiple actions. And if we observe that kind of action, like for example, under collaboration, one of the action is I share resources with my group members. And if I'm seeing that happening, then I can mark the student or maybe the group accordingly. And then, you know, since I have observed it, since I have an evidence, and then I can then collate the how are we rating the classroom. Also on the basis of safety, we have multiple levels wherein we have particular actions. So yeah, something on that lines.
Thanks, Aishwarya. I'll sum up what I understood, and then if anyone has any questions, they can jump in. You're talking mostly about things you do before the program, which is you do proper need sensing. It's based on rubrics and the sort of alignment you get to the rubric is by observations. And you also delved a little bit into impact assessment, which mostly happens after a program. So maybe you've learned something from a previous program and you're using that to inform your oncoming program, is what I understood. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, like so am I not audible actually? Is my sound very nimble? Because like even in the group this was a problem.
No, I think I can hear you clearly.
Okay. So it's I mean I was trying to also explain about how we have this particular rubrics on which we refer so that we are able to collect evidences. So I think one thing that I just add. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Aishwarya. Any questions, anyone?
It's
Please.
Akriti.
Sorry, Akriti. I'm sorry. I saw your names like right next to each other. Thanks, Akriti. If anyone has any comments or questions, just feel free to unmute and share. I'm not supposed to be a moderator or anything here. You can just unmute and share. Okay. If not, someone from group 3.
Yeah, I could maybe start off and then anyone could continue. I think we discussed the different kinds of practices came up. So we had looking at a needs assessment as a practice before you start going ahead with an intervention, literature reviews, and some kind of a diagnostics test where you get a sense of what is required and where the intervention group is at. And I think Aishwarya also shared about how they would use a SWOT analysis, talk to different stakeholders they're working with to understand what's the requirement. And I think I thought about reading published literature and also reading articles which criticize interventions or look at the consequences of it in a negative sense so that there's a more well-rounded picture of what you're getting into. If you guys, Daya and Aishwarya, if you want to share something about this.
No, I think you very well summed it.
That's great. I mean, there's some points on there that I've never thought of. But that's wonderful. Any thoughts, comments, concerns about what group 3 is sharing? Okay. Anyone else? Any other group that would like to share? If you covered something that hasn't been covered already. So we've seen using rubrics, observations, impact assessment from previous programs. We've seen needs assessment, lit reviews, diagnostic exercises, SWOT analyses, and articles that look at the or like play devil's advocate for an intervention or a style. Anything else to add, Anirudh?
Hello.
Yes.
Harika and I were talking about the interventions. Like, I don't think that we talked a lot about needs assessment, to be honest. But what we were talking about is that, and Radhika, please feel free to add, like if I'm missing out on something. We were talking about how, like, for the interventions, at least, like we would rely on our own experiences, previous experiences of what we have done, or what our institution talks about in terms of what might work in a particular situation in terms of closing the gap, or we might talk to someone who has been working in the field for like not like for some time or like longer than us at least, and we would consider them as the expert or the voice of reason, like the credible voice in this particular case, and like rely on those inputs for designing a lot of interventions that we have. But we also realized that a lot of these inputs that come in are not always very explicit about the assumptions that they have made, or yeah, basically like the assumptions that they have made in terms of why they're doing what they're doing and how they're measuring, or like not I wouldn't use the word measure, but how they are assessing whether the intervention that they are doing is actually doing what they want the intervention to do. It's not always clear the assumption that's being made in that context. So yeah, I mean, like that is something which we often rely on, or we have relied on in our previous workspaces when we are doing interventions. Of course, there's needs assessment, but in terms of the actual intervention, like this is one thing that we have relied on.
That's a great point, Anirudh. I think we're gonna delve into it a little bit towards the end of today, but we do talk a lot about research. When we talk about evidence, it's mostly defined by practices that are done in natural sciences and how that becomes our standard. But how do we make sure that contextualization happens? And if we don't have any research, where do we go? We go to our own experiences. How much can we rely on that? What are some ways to adjust for biases and practitioners and voices of reason, like you said? Any thoughts before we move on?
I think on similar lines, me, Soumya, and Daya were discussing that when you have interventions which maybe have not been done before, or are unique in their own way, and when you don't have anything to look back at, it's always you set it up for yourself. You set it up for the intervention, and then you find out those evidences, and then you go back, redefine, redesign, and that's how the process goes. And through that process is when you are able to produce that sort of like your own trial and error, and as a result you find something out, and that informs the community then. So I think in a few cases that's how the process is. And is there a way out of it, was something that we were discussing. And yeah.
Out of this trial and error process, Aishwarya?
Yeah, I mean, when social interventions are like that, like you shared, right? That it is going to be something that we will have to do and form those evidences. There's no, there's nothing to compare it to, or to look at, in the larger context and community. That is something that we were thinking about.
Got it. I'll leave so these are very interesting points. I'll just leave the floor open for 30 seconds if someone wants to jump in and start talking more about what they think.
I'm just adding a clarification that I myself just got. So me, Palak, and Soumya hadn't understood the question earlier, and we were in general talking about how evidence is being used in the work that we do currently. We did not realize that we were supposed to be talking about how it's how do we start using evidence before the program is implemented, and that's why I think just got the clarity from the discussion now. Thank you.
Thanks, Akriti. Anyone else? So this is something that comes up in my work a lot as well, where I'm often thinking, okay, if I want to try something new and innovative, there is no possible evidence for it before. But what is the best that I can do to make sure what I'm targeting towards is not going to lead to any negative consequences? For example, for SEL, someone was mentioning about how you need extensive research to do anything in SEL. You can't cause damage there. If I'm trying to come up with an intervention that is supposed to improve SEL outcomes for students, I won't for sure need to start blind, because if not in education, if not through other interventions in education, there must be some developmental psychology studies, some studies in social emotional well-being in general of people that I can draw from, and what extent am I going to make sure that I'm well informed there before I start developing a solution? Would be my question to the group. Not looking for answers. It's just a thought that I'm struggling with right now. What do I do to make sure that I'm doing as much as I can to make sure I'm the most informed about the kind of intervention I'm designing? And second, if there's absolutely nothing out there, what can I do post-program or during the program to make sure whatever trial and error I'm doing is evaluated against set standards to tell me that it worked? That if it didn't work, how will I know? Who is going to, because if I design a solution or I'm implementing a solution, I'm kind of married to it. As humans, we're just really attached to things we create. And it's very hard for me myself to tell me, or my team to tell me, this is really bad, please do something else. Or this didn't work. So how do I set structures and processes in place that if something's not working really, I know that it's not working and I do something about it? And that's an open question to the group as well. And we'll be, discussing through this over the next few sessions also. And thanks everyone for sharing what you do. I think we've seen a spectrum of what level of evidence practices people in our group follow. So that's going to be really interesting to explore. Because I genuinely think none of these is wrong. It's just you have to decide with the resources you have, what is the best that you can do at this point. Moving on, I'll quickly walk you through this checklist that we at CoLab try to follow anytime we're doing a program. Okay, just quickly. First, did we conduct a needs assessment to identify the problem? And this comes with an asterisk, right? Sometimes you don't do it. Sometimes you're starting not problem first, but solution first. Maybe you have this really innovative idea and you don't want to do needs assessment. You just want to retrofit a problem to that. This is also controversial. We can discuss this more outside of this, but needs assessment is one general step we follow. Did you do secondary and or primary research while coming up with your theory of change? So your theory of change is your program. When you were designing your program, did you do the research that you needed, both secondary and primary? And did you design a very well-built monitoring and evaluation framework, right? To see if it's happening per plan or not. During the program and after the program, we won't go into right now. I really want us to spend a lot of time reading through the paper that I selected for us today. So I'm just going to stop here because we're only talking about the first three. Let me just quickly walk you through these three elements, right? One is needs assessment, research, which can be either primary or secondary, and monitoring and evaluation. For ourselves, to make sure that we have certain standards for how we're doing these three things, we've come up with standard operating procedures for ourselves, right? If you want, I can share these tools with you separately, but these are very readily available on Google, on the internet. You just have to type, how do I create a log framework? How do I create a monitoring and evaluation framework? What are some steps I should follow when I'm doing social sciences research, secondary and primary? But if you don't want to get into that and want ready access to resources, we can definitely share them with you. But the objective of this session is not for me to walk you through how to do needs assessment and how to do research. Everyone has their own way of doing this. There's no set precise way of doing these things. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'll just quickly show you what I have. So if you find value in it, you can sort of create something similar for yourself. So for needs assessment, we try to do this very basic thing. And if you have ideas on that, I'd love for you to share. I'll pause after I've shared this. So we do on-ground observations, on-ground interviews, focus group discussions, remote interviews in FGDs and surveys. And we try to say, okay, this year CoLab wants to work on social emotional learning. Where do we start? What is the need? What do we do? So for that, we would start with something like this, right? If we have some domain that we want to work on, you have funder limitations a lot of times when you're working with CSO. So it's very hard to start something without a need or without like some area that you want to work in. If you don't have that, you can skip the needs assessment and we can talk more about that on a separate call. If you're interested, please just email me and we'll set something up. Because we talk about that in design at Mantra for Change a lot. Akhil's also a part of those conversations, and he has very different opinions from mine. So we'd be happy to get on a call and get in a debate with you about what's the right way to go. But this is usually what we do, right? Like we talk, we go to the field as a sponge and absorb information. And from there, we decide, okay, this is the need that we want to work on. And then we validate that with certain primary research tools. And I'll go into that those list of tools a little bit just in a minute, actually. Anything that you want to add here that's not been discussed on this slide or in the discussion that people were doing on the previous section? Okay, I'll share these with you anyway. So if you have thoughts, please just share. Next is secondary research. So we've divided into 3 major steps, and we have like a more detailed thing, this SOP. Let me quickly share that with you so you have a sense of what I'm talking about. So the 3 steps that I shared were planning, data collection, and next steps. So we have, very, very specific steps. Like first, you choose the topic based on your needs analysis. Then you list your research questions, and then we have a resource on how to make good research questions. That's also a skill that we've had to develop over a period of time. Or not all research questions are good. You need it to be the exact balance of, specific and broad. This is just me showing you what it looks like. So when I share the tool with you, you're not like, what is this? Then we identify the type of literature review. So depending on the purpose of why you're doing it, it could be for a program, it could just be for publishing a paper. How do you select the right keywords? And that's also a skill that we've had to really develop in our team. When you're doing a literature review, what are the kinds of keywords you use to get relevant material for yourself? Then when you go to data collection, what are some things you do? So you do, I'm sorry, how do you document your literature review, for example? And then what are the next steps, right? How do you go into like creating a paper out of it? Do you do like solution design out of it? So we have certain steps for that for both secondary and primary research. So I'll share that with you separately because this is not the best way to go about it. So yeah, we have some tools that you can use. And then for primary research as well, that's a more detailed process. So it includes forming your research objective. It can and it should most likely come from your secondary research. So you start with secondary research and then you decide if you want to do primary research. If you've answered your question with secondary research, you don't need to go into that. With primary research, what is the exact information you want to know? You formulate research questions, you identify the population that you want to do the study with, and you understand the type of research study. Do you want to prove something or do you want to compare 2 things? What is the type of study you want to do? So we have tools to help you decide those things. How do you do sampling? Now, who here on this call has ever done sampling for a primary research study before?
Riya, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Anirudh, can you share your experience with sampling?
So majorly, like I think like what we ended up doing is so to set the context, like we needed to do like an education landscape analysis for a block in we wanted to like a sort of did it as we could. So what we did is that the random like picking schools at random was something which was not possible for us because of the resource constraints and we did not have the access to like randomly chosen schools, to be honest. So what we did is that we ended up stratifying the block into like different types. So for example, we divided it into urban and rural areas, and then urban, rural, and tribal areas, and then also like small schools, large schools, medium schools, and so on. And for each of the category, we selected like a couple of schools based on like convenience sampling, and we because and then we ended up collecting data like in terms of qualitative data at the end of the day. So that's what that's how we went ahead with the entire thing. So yeah, that's my experience has been for one of
Thank
them.
you. Thanks, Anirudh. So he basically walked us through this whole step, right? You have your population and then you decide on a sampling frame, which is convenient to you, which is accessible to you. From that, you can decide on, well, how many do you need to sample for your study to be viable? And there are ways to do that. And from that, like how, if you need 10 schools, which will be those 10 schools, for example? And you can use things like stratified random sampling or cluster random sampling. So this was a complex process for us to understand. So for our organization, we created this tool that could basically help anybody do sampling for their primary research project, right? We're still learning how to sample well, really. We're learning from other third-party evaluation organizations who are working with us right now for some of our programs. We're also learning from Google on how to do a better job at it. But yeah, sampling is something that we really had to spend time on. And now we finally learned it, I think, and still, but kind of there. So if you need support with that, definitely reach out to Anirudh because he has experience. I think, Srinidhi, did you also give a thumbs up of having done sampling before? Right, so you know who to email for your sampling needs. And then, how do you create data collection tools? What are the different available data collection tools for primary research, and what are the most common ones? And what are some things you should keep in mind while you're selecting them? What are some things you should keep in mind while designing questions for them? And then collecting data. So then analyzing data and then testing your hypothesis if you started with one in the first place. Dissemination, how do you write a research article? How do you publish the research article? Do you need to publish the research article? Most times you do. So that others can learn from what you found and they don't have to repeat the efforts you put into finding new information. And then, where do you go from there? Do you design an intervention? Do you do more research? How much time and resource do you have at hand? So it's a very complex but beautiful process. I really enjoy engaging with it and testing every time we're doing something like this to see, can we do this the way it's supposed to, or do we need to make some cuts in the time and resources we're spending on it, depending on the needs, or say a department has this deadline that you can't push to do a primary research study, so you kind of have to. So what is your way forward with that? So it's really exciting stuff. But basically what I'm trying to tell you is that we do have a process in place that we follow. If you at your organization don't, I would urge you to set something up that suits your organization's needs, and I'll be sure to share these tools with you if they're helpful. Okay. Any thoughts and questions before we move on? Okay, is this a lot to take in? So the whole purpose of this learning community is not for me to tell you how to do these things because we're still learning, and this is not that kind of space. But at least if you've not done any of these things before, you know where you can start, or you can reach out to some people on here and figure out the best course for yourself. So we've talked a lot about this empirical evidence. We've talked about research and these things that a lot of organizations do. We make sure we go through Google Scholar. We make sure we find data to support our TOC before we do an intervention. And even if you don't, there's a lot of emphasis that's laid on doing research before you do a program. And owing to some of the concerns that were coming up before about you might not find evidence for what you're trying to do. I came across this paper, and I would really like everyone to engage with it. So this is the paper that we're going to read for the next 20 minutes. Read and discuss. It's very short. It's an opinion piece more than a paper. I'm sharing a link with you here. And the question that you'll be answering while you're doing this, you're studying, reading this paper, and then you get into your group and discuss. The question I want everyone to sort of discuss is this. What is your opinion on how research should be approached in education? So this is a link to the paper. We will use our same workbook from last time. I've created a different tab for this paper. And there's this place where you can put down your group number, which is basically your breakout room number. And you put down your list of participants in that group, so you know whose thoughts these are. And then you can put down your thoughts as you're reading or as you're discussing, both works. Right? This is a very short read. So I think it should take maximum 10 minutes for people to read it. And then you can spend the next 10 minutes discussing it, and let's come back at 5:25.
But I am
But
not
don't you
entirely sure.
think we say that in terms of limitations? For instance, we say
Yeah.
that this intervention didn't happen because of so and so limitation, not
Yeah.
necessarily saying my intervention is actually accounting for these realities on ground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so what we end up doing is that we, as you said, like we use this as a limitation, and then I
Yeah.
think like then knowingly, unknowingly, we end up carving it out in a sense that we end up saying that agar ye nahi hua hota. I don't know. Are you comfortable with Hindi? Like I don't
I
know.
can
Like do you?
follow. I might not be able to
Okay.
respond well, but I can follow.
Sure. Perfect. Okay. Sorry. So what I'm saying is that कि अगर फॉर एग्जांपल ये नहीं हुआ होता like और ये reality नहीं हुआ होता then our intervention would have worked really well or this is the reason that our intervention didn't work, but the thing is that reality that we saw is a critical part of the world that we are working in, or it might be like a necessary part of the world that we're working with. It's just like it poses an inconvenience for us or for our intervention the way that we have designed, but it might be serving a different purpose, or basically we don't understand that reality really well. We want to nip it out, or like basically we want to cut it out and say that this is an inconvenience.
And after reading this article, I'm thinking none of us are expert.
Exactly. It's just sent me also into this very questioning mindset about my own work. But like I also skimmed towards the end, and in the end there's this very beautiful quote which says the complexity of things, the things within things just seem to be endless. I mean, nothing is easy, nothing is simple. So I think this is what it is. Our work is complex, and I think there's no one answer, I think.
What is it that you do?
I work at Simple Education Foundation as an associate. I am right now based in Tehri Garhwal, a village. I mean, it's a village I'm staying in a village in Uttarakhand. And we work with 5 schools over here here we've also placed 5 fellows who are from the community itself, who are working in the government schools along with the principals. And the major thing that affects the education landscape over here is multi-grade mixed learning over here. The students are mostly from different grades in the same classroom. So I think that's a problem that we are working.
I'd really love for everyone to share. Not everyone, but anyone who's feeling really strongly about something. Or I heard a couple of rooms were talking about how they were just questioning their own work. And I mean, that's nice that a piece of writing does that for you. I think that's wonderful. I wish more pieces of writing make me question what I do. I think that's just generally important. But I was really thrilled to hear that. But any thoughts about this paper? Something that you're thinking along the lines of evidence about this? I know there are thoughts because I was in all the rooms. I would really like for someone to share a large group.
Okay, I think I can just go ahead. I think reading the paper, just beginning, I think I couldn't read the entire paper, so I just read the first 3-4 pages. And through reading the paper, I think there was some sort of questions that were coming in my mind about how we also are, like my work is also based on teacher trainings. So like also the mention that how teacher training should in a way is like also limiting the term is itself limiting, and it's supposed to be more more empowering and something on the lines of teacher education. And also there was this question that kept coming to me, what am am I also capable, or like am I also, what supports that my own understanding, and how am I also in this position to be able to be a trainer? And these questions kept coming, ki, what certifies me to be here? So I think, yeah, these were some questions that kept coming to me.
Thanks, Akriti. Okay. I think I understand, like there must be a lot that you want to share, but here's the thing. So there's this sheet. So I see that some of us have filled out what we were discussing about. Some of us are still writing. There are two groups that haven't written anything. Can I please urge you to jot down your thoughts? It'll not only help you crystallize what you just read and remember learnings from that, but also help other community members learn from you about what you thought. Because like I said, this is an opinion piece, so it might vary from how one person took it versus another one did. Thanks for sharing, Vyasha. Now, one more thing that I'd like for us to do is do a congruence scan after reading this paper. So this paper's whole premise was to make us rethink, what do we do in terms of evidence before we start an intervention? Is it enough? And what we consider enough, is it the right thing to do? So I'd like us to keep that question with us while we're working. There's no right answer to this. I think just having this question in the back of our heads is the first big step that we all can take to making sure we're doing the best that we can by ourselves, right? After reading this paper, I know we're at time, so take some time to fill out the congruence scan now. Here's the link. You can do this right after the call as well. This congruence scan, more for the community, is for you individually, to take the most out of these spaces and engaging with these learning resources as possible. So make the use of this sheet for that purpose. For now, I'd like to close out, and just next up, I have a slide for this, but I don't need to show it to you. It's just next up, we're going to talk about what do we do after and during the program and after the program. What do we do? It'll flow from this itself. So what we've done before, and if we couldn't do anything before, what are some things we can continue doing through the program, after the program? How do we iterate it? How do we know if it's working? And then the fourth meeting, the one after the next one, we're calling in experts to help us understand how to make all of this possible. So there's a bajillion things that we can do in evidence, but what do we focus on? What is important? What is non-negotiable? We can't decide that for ourselves without doing research ourselves, but we'll rely on some people who have been working in this field for a very long time. So there's this one person who runs this organization called Evidence in Education. And they've been working on this for a very, very long time. And we have a couple of funders as well who work from the perspective of evidence, who are lined up. We're still confirming with them. We're still trying to get more people on board. But the fourth session will be where we can bring in our questions and concerns and reflect on what they're saying and ask them those practical questions of what to focus on, what can we do. But apart from that, please use the congruence scan from what you think you should continue doing after these meetings. And that's it. I have a feedback form that I would want all of you to fill out. This is the link, which is just for me to know if this session is useful, if it's relevant, these spaces, how can they be better for all of us as a community? So I would love it if you could take just 2 minutes to fill this form out. And I'll pause now. And if anybody wants to share any closing thoughts before we end, you're welcome to.
I think I just want to thank you because back at college, this is what we used to do every day. But right now in working in silos, this is just actively putting that frame of questions, right, regarding the larger questions that we need to address in terms of the work that we do. So just thank you to you both.
Thanks, Daya. That's really nice. We also take as much as we, do creating this space. Just discussing every 2 weeks is just really nice to keep us on our toes also and stop claiming that we work in evidence without really engaging with it on a regular basis properly. So this is really helpful for us as well. Anybody else? Anything about evidence? Any takeaways?
I'm kind of looking to see how can I take this back into the organization as well. Like it's not just about me trying to learn this, but everybody at the organization, right from the field up to the founder, everybody has to engage with this regularly at like any given point of time. So yeah, it's really like gives that reflective space out lots of ideas of how to take it back. But yeah, thanks to everybody actually for sharing different thoughts and
Thank you, Tiasha.
Just an observation, right? When you work with evidence or when you actively start reading these research papers, I think your outlook changes, your perspective changes. So whenever you design something or you're generally working, you tend to look at it from a very different perspective. You start looking at things from the perspective of evidence and trying to see if it is, what we're doing is just not hypothetical or it is actually going according to, probably is it aligning with our values or is it aligning with our vision, mission? So I think it's very, very helpful. And these discussions, I think it's making us think a lot. And I'm very grateful for that. If you can also share, where do you get these research papers? Because something that has really been, something that I've always been thinking is these researchers which are contextualized are not very accessible. So how do we access these resources? Where do we get these research papers? And how do we share them in the community? Is there a place where we can get them? That will be really helpful.
We'll do that, Anamika. That's a great question. So we have someone who's Akhil and Deepa from our team have been working on this paper on evidence in education. So a lot of the work in finding these resources, they're helping us do while we run this. So either I'll get Deepa to give like a small bite on how she finds these, or if she's using specific keywords, like I said, it's a skill that we can learn from Deepa. I'll let her sort of take like 5 minutes in the next call to explain.
And to answer to one part of your question, where if you find something to upload is definitely the LinkedIn kind of the page that we have created, please, have a look at it. We have constantly, putting efforts to bring in some resource to all of you so that, we keep this learning community as engaging as possible. And we appreciate you folks also to, if you find something, it could be as small as like, I read this paragraph, what are your thoughts? Just, post it on that community and, we can interact, we can make it like a proper discussion forum and do that. Yeah. Yes, I will share that with you, Radhika. I will put it up on the group as well so that, you can easily access sometime. I'll put it in the description or something like that. So it's easier for you folks.
Anirudh, we do have a resource on how to use Sci-Hub for people who have not used Sci-Hub before. So I'll share that with our whole toolkit of primary and secondary research, like I said. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and then see you 2 weeks from now.
Thank you, Rhea. Thank you, Akhil. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.